Hello, everyone. My name is Kubra Zengin, and I'm the regional lead for North America Google Developer Groups and Women Tech Makers programs at Google. Welcome to Elevate with Google Developers today. Thank you so much for joining us. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. So we would love to know where you are joining from today. And then while we are doing that, I would like to kick it off with an introduction to Elevate with Google Developers, as I always do. Elevate is a full-year applied skills program that we are hosting great speakers on a monthly basis on the themes of how to transition to a new career, how to grow your career, and how to grow yourself as a professional. So within those themes, we touch on communication skills, leadership skills, negotiation, and so on. You can check out the website for more information for the schedule and topics specifically. With every session, actually, you can incorporate your learnings to your professional career and take it to the next level with some workshops and presentations that we are having throughout the year. So we have only one last episode for December besides today, and just don't miss that one too. We are thrilled that you could join us today, and moving forward, hope you all can benefit from the content we have all of the sessions on YouTube channel. Housekeeping for today. As this is a great guideline for all of our events, I would like to remind you once again, let's be excellent to each other. To that extent, please follow all the community guidelines on our website and the links we share. Secondly, add your questions to the chat and be mindful of your questions. So we are going to take all of the questions in a timely manner for our speakers to answer one by one. And lastly, we are here to help with your questions and concerns. If you have any comments or any concerns, please share with us at elevate-team@google.com so we can get back to you shortly. So let's get it started. Today's session will start with a presentation followed by a Q&A session. You can again ask your questions during the presentation without waiting. And we are going to take all the questions in a timely manner again, and then to, answer all of them. So now it's time to welcome our first speaker. So Leo is joining me today from the marketing team, who is working at Google, actually, to talk about what is the topic? High impact feedback conversations. So we'll just welcome him here today, and then, let's get an applause, just the virtual applause here. Welcome, Leo.
Awesome. Great. And nice to be here. Thank you all for having me and taking the time to join this session on high impact feedback conversations. So as Kubra mentioned, I am a Googler. I work at Google. I've been here about 7 years, and my job is exactly what you see here. It's leadership and team development. So I call it developer as a quirky way, because some of you here on the call are developers. But my job is mostly focused on leadership development and making sure that teams are working effectively in the workplace. And sure enough, one of the topics that always comes up is feedback and the role that feedback plays in the workplace as we do our work. You can even transition some of this to life as well. So to get started, let's just maybe take a internal poll. Since I can't see your answers, it's okay, but just think of something for a second. Think of the last time that you received stellar feedback. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Now, think of a time when maybe you received feedback that wasn't that helpful. Think about that for a second. All right, I'm assuming you have something. And so here, what was the difference? If you were to really think about it, maybe the good feedback was very helpful, and maybe it made you aware of something that you hadn't noticed before, or maybe it caused you to change your behavior in order to be able to get better or able to contribute to a project. And perhaps that unhelpful feedback was very vague or riddled with personal opinions or delivered just at the wrong time, right? Sometimes we just get feedback that way. So the goal for today is to cover the role that feedback has in our life and at work, and provide a few ideas as to how to get and receive actionable and high impact feedback so that the next time after this call or after this live stream, an opportunity presents itself, you know what to keep in mind in order to receive feedback as well as to give it. So to start off, I'll start with a little story. Part of my past was serving in the United States Army. I was an officer in the Army, and I had the incredible opportunity to lead soldiers as part of the Army. And feedback there, or I call instant feedback, was embedded into our culture. And so to think about it, in really high stakes situations, we could not afford to be silent, and we needed everyone's input. So we also understood, there's a mentality shift there. We understood that it wasn't personal and that the goal of the group was more important than their individual desires or individual needs. And so I say that to say that feedback was a way to keep ourselves accountable and ensure that we were staying on track. We would debrief every single mission that we did. And here's a picture of me with my unit over in the Middle East back in 2010. And debriefing after every single mission and looking for ways to improve our craft, even if it was calling out the smallest thing, really helped us improve as a unit. And so this might make sense right now as I'm speaking about it, but creating that kind of feedback environment to both receive and give it is actually a lot harder than we realize. And so my intention in sharing the story with you is to show you that it is indeed possible to create these conditions. And whether you're an individual contributor on this live stream, whether you lead a team, whether you're a developer that works in a large corporation or an academic institution, or even a startup or a small business, the goal is that you take away something from this call that you can instantly apply to your work today. So to get started, what is feedback? Let's get a common definition. So some of you may or may not know this, but the term feedback comes from the world of cybernetics, which is the study of control and communications and information processing in systems, where outputs in a system are used as inputs to improve it or to feed back onto itself. That's essentially where the term feedback comes from, where you take outputs and use them as inputs to improve the system. And something to note, feedback in this context should be based on actual performance rather than expected performance. So it should be an actual observation or a physical result or outcome. And it should also be in service of achieving a goal or a desired outcome, rather than a personal opinion or, you wanted to just say something. So let's look at a visual representation of that. Here's a drawing from my Instagram as well as LinkedIn channel called the Team Weekly. And the visual here is you can see somebody's rowing a boat. And typically we think of our path whenever we do work or a project as being very linear. But sure enough, if we use the same analogy here, there might be currents in the water. There might be headwinds that we don't anticipate. There might be differences in waves or, we're wrong strokes as we're rowing. And so what ends up happening is we start veering off the direction, the intended direction to achieve those goals. And if we leave that untouched, what ends up happening is we drift so far off that we end up losing a lot of time, or it might just take us more effort to come back and stay on course. And so that's the role of feedback. If you can do that on the spot correction, that initial, and just get right back on track, then it's a lot easier. It saves people a lot of time, and you're able to build more trust with those around you that you work. And so that's just a little visual representation of the role that feedback plays in all of our lives all the time. Feedback is also a way to increase self-awareness, right? So what I'm showing you here is a model it's called the Jary window, and I'm just giving you a little snippet of it so that we don't get very technical. But oftentimes we typically operate in this area called the arena where our behaviors are known to others and they're unknown to ourselves. And so that's basically how you express yourself every day. That's probably how you're showing up for your work every day. And the trick, though, is oftentimes there are certain behaviors or perceptions or opinions of us that others have that we don't know. And the Jary window calls it the blind spot. And so we need to know whether we are sending signals that might actually be getting in the way of achieving our goals. Without this more focused feedback, we spend a lot of time or great portions of our lives guessing at how others perceive us, or just gossiping, honestly, behind each other's back about how perceptions and reactions that we will not share with others face-to-face show up. And so with accurate, focused, deliberate, interpersonal feedback, our efforts to learn are reduced to pure trial and error. So this is the importance of both giving feedback in service of helping others, but more importantly, in my opinion, is seeking it in order for us to know how our behaviors are landing in the ways that we're intending them to. So, I'm constantly aware of this. If I'm always thinking, well, I wonder how that landed. Let me go ask somebody. Or I just completed this project. Did I do a good enough job? And so seeking those behaviors or seeking that feedback behavior is also as important as giving it. And so in addition to self-awareness, here are a couple of things that happen in the mind. So at the very, very core of high impact feedback conversation, there's this notion of self, and everybody, because we are so different and because of our different upbringings and cultural patterns, we all have a different orientation to feedback. And this is what's really happening in our head that says, how do you show up to feedback interactions, both on the giving end and the receiving end? And so this is a 4-step factors or critical factors for feedback orientation, and we all have different ones, but it really comes down to these 4 things. So number 1 is utility, which is this is your tendency to believe that feedback is useful in achieving goals and or obtaining desired outcomes. You personally have that belief that feedback is important. It's an amplifier for learning and growth. And, just think about it right now. Think of any world-class performer. We know that they get a lot of feedback, right? Like even the Olympics that happened earlier this year, most of it has a metric of feedback. I'm thinking perhaps in gymnastics, you get a specific score. That's feedback as to how you're doing. And so I think about world-class performances consistently get feedback, and that's what allowed them to be super world-class and elite at that level. But it comes from this notion of knowing that it's useful or having utility. The second factor is accountability. This is your tendency to feel a sense of obligation to react and actually do something about the feedback that you receive. Some of us score high on accountability, some of us score low. That just depends on who we are and our preferences. The third one is social awareness, and that's that tendency to use feedback to be aware of others' views of us and to be sensitive to these views. And so this is all about the stories of others, about our reputation. And we just talked about that in the Jary window, right? That's the blind spot area, to increase your social awareness about how others might be perceiving you. And then the last factor is what's called feedback self-efficacy, which is your perceived competence to accurately interpret, and respond to feedback appropriately. And so that's your confidence in your ability to do something about it. So these are the 4 factors. And as I mentioned earlier, in order, it is possible to create environments where feedback is celebrated and perceived as needed. And we know, and for the managers out there or the people that work on teams out there, research does show that managers who have a high feedback orientation are known to create work climates, where others on their team begin to also have higher feedback orientations. It's kind of contagious. If you're creating that environment, it just feeds, not to be quippy here, but it actually feeds onto itself. And so higher feedback orientation across these 4 factors, it's all different across everyone, but it is possible to create an environment because of this. And so this is just something to be aware of for you when you think about feedback. Figure out, do you find it useful? Do you hold yourself accountable anytime you receive comments from others? Are you aware, or are you accessing those blind spots? And then finally, are you confident that you can actually do something about it? That's the self-efficacy part of it. And so now let's think about roles in the feedback process. We just talked about mindsets. Now let's think of roles. So very, very similar, right? Like very simple. We have receiver, and then we have the giver. And so what's happening in between here is that the giver and the receiver must both agree on the goals or the standards of the interaction, right? Like it doesn't make sense if I'm asking you for feedback, let's just call it, I'm playing tennis, and I'm asking you for feedback on my forehand, but you're giving me feedback on my footwork, then we're not aligned on goals, and I'm less likely to receive that feedback. So you have to agree on the goals first. Then there should be time for when both parties are ready. We mentioned this, maybe unhelpful feedback. Sometimes you might be interrupted in the middle of something and told something to improve, and you're less likely to even pay attention to that, right? It just makes sense. You have to find the right timing for feedback and be deliberate about that. And then finally, there should be a constructive motive, right? Never to destroy or never to tear down. Feedback should be in service of improving and getting us to that goal. And so that's what helps depersonalize it. And so a way to think about it is, and I'll read this, the receiver is thinking, how can I ensure that what you'll tell me about my work and how I come across will be truthful, guided by sincere motives to help me, and relevant to what I'm trying to do. And then on the other side, the giver also has some thoughts, which are, how can I ensure that you'll hear me and that you will take seriously what I have to tell you, and that you continue to see me as being helpful? Some of us work with colleagues and we want to be seen as helpful to contribute to the team. And feedback can be a very delicate process. And so here are just the two roles and some of the mindsets. And one of my favorite quotes about this is just from Edgar Schein, who's a fantastic individual and thinker in this space. He says, those engaged in a designed feedback process must trust each other. And feedback from someone who does not accurately perceive how I behave and or who cannot communicate what they perceive will be of little help to me. It's pretty obvious, this quote, right? You're less likely to be receptive to feedback from someone that you may not trust or perhaps may not respect. And so a base level of trust has to exist, while at the same time, feedback is also a way to build trust. The more repetitions of successful feedback conversations, the more that trust builds, the more reliability that you're creating with that person, whether you're giving it or receiving it from someone. And so sometimes we think about our family members in that way. We're more receptive because they're our family. We trust them. They know intimate details about us. And so we're more likely to listen to any comments that they might have to say versus someone that perhaps we work with that we have not gotten the time to really know each other on a more personal level. And so as a way to build trust, this is the trust equation, right? Like when we really break down trust, it's about credibility. Do you have that credibility in my perception to give me that feedback? Reliability, right? Is what you're saying reliable? Are you a reliable person on this team that I can count on? And are you coming across as being authentic? Is this coming from a place to be constructive and helpful as opposed to destructive or having personal opinions? And notice for you mathematicians out there, notice that it's an equation. And so what the denominator of it is the perception of self-interest. The lower the perception of self-interest, the better the trust. So if I'm coming from a place of serving myself or selfishness, then you're less likely to trust me or see me as someone that's actually operating in service of you. And so that's just a way to think about trust. The big takeaway here is that, yes, while feedback conversations people must trust each other, at the same time, feedback is a way to build trust, especially when we work on teams. When's the last time, for example, that you proactively sought help or feedback from someone that you work with or a customer? Who knows? And the more that we do that, the more trust that we can build. And we're also teaching ourselves that behavior over time just to continue to get better. And so now let's get kind of tactical. How do we think about having these conversations? And so in simple terms, we want to separate motivational from corrective feedback. So some feedback really supports others and motivates them and feeds their confidence. And then there's some corrective feedback, similar to that boat analogy. You want to correct the course before it goes way too much astray and you lose too much time and effort. And so we just want to make that distinction when we have these conversations and say, hey, I wanted to give you some positive reinforcement or some support. Or, hey, I noticed something here. Here's what's going on. And one of the things to consider there is be mindful of the ratio that you do that in, right? Like our minds have limited capacity to process a lot of information. And so there's this golden ratio of 3-to-1, 3 motivational feedback comments to 1 challenge, right? Because what ends up happening in the brain is you trigger the anxious brain. And if you give someone corrective feedback, they're going to just anchor on that. And so try to give some motivational feedback as well to help counterbalance that anxious brain. We also want to be mindful that the corrective feedback should be future oriented. It's less about the past and more about being solutions focused versus problems focused. And so if you're giving the feedback, you might say, what are we going to do about it? Or ask the person, what ideas do you have to help solve for this? The fourth bit here is and it might be really obvious, is make your feedback specific, right? It's less helpful to say, you need to improve your communication skills versus, I noticed that your volume when you have public speaking engagements is really low. And so that's causing you to lose a little bit of credibility with the audience because they're just trying to hear you or they can't hear you, right? That's different than saying you need to improve your communication skills. So the more specific, the more you can bound it with facts from an actual event that occurred. And if you remember the definition, feedback from actual performance versus expected performance, that would be really helpful for the person. And then finally, like I mentioned earlier, you can have a whole list of things to tell somebody, or somebody might have a whole list of things to tell you. But we also know that, we know how hard it is to change behaviors already. And so to tell someone to change multiple things is really hard, and it affects the brain. And so the likelihood of someone taking that feedback might be low if there are many messages being relayed, especially disparate messages. And so just pull out one thing. What's the one high leverage corrective piece of feedback that's going to help someone improve their impact on the team, for the project, or to achieve that desired outcome? So this is just a general guideline as to how to think about giving feedback. But I also want to signal that you should be on the lookout for these things too, should you be on the receiving end of a feedback conversation. And so one other element of putting into practice, I'm just going to give you one model. There's many feedback models out there. It's less about memorizing the model and more about finding a nice structure for delivering your message for you to remember anytime you're in the feedback conversation. And so the one that I'll present here is the SBI. So situation, behavior, impact. Situation, these are the facts. This is when and where the behavior was observed. Then the behavior, describe what was going on and how it happened. And then finally, talk about the impact. Like, why is it even important for you to even mention and take the time out of your day to say it? What was the impact on that? So here's an example. On Thursday, during the investor meeting, you interrupted me 3 times, and I was in the middle of my portion of the presentation. I was frustrated. This is the impact. I was frustrated because I felt disrespected, especially because we had agreed upon speaking roles, and I'm worried about our working relationship. And so you see, we give the situation, we talk about the observed behavior, which was that interruption. And then finally we say, well, here's the impact that it had on me, and here's the impact that it might have on the work. In this instance, the working relationship. And so as you have the conversation, though, you say that, you should pause too. Don't continue to talk. Pause for reflection. Maybe the person might be processing and taking it in. Let them see what they have to say. And then check for understanding. Sometimes it's possible that our feedback may not be the full picture of what might be going on. And so be open to that possibility. Maybe there was a miscommunication or you interpreted the situation differently. And so remember that the point is to advance the goal and desired outcome of whatever you're working on, and less about having personal vendettas. Sometimes those cross. And so we just want to be mindful to not let our emotions overtake a feedback conversation. And a way to do that is to check for understanding. So you could ask, hey, what was your reaction to what I just said? Or how's this landing for you? Or why do you think this is important? Why do you think I'm telling you this? Or perhaps something like, hey, what can I help clarify in what I just told you? Once you do that, that produces a conversation before finally you talk about, once again, future oriented. You can decide how you would like to move forward. So that's one model, the SBI, and I'll put it back up here. Remember, I'm just talking about corrective feedback here, but it's also possible to have very positive interactions here and say, hey, on last Saturday while we were doing volunteer work, I really noticed that you were stepping up doing a lot of engagement with the public and making people feel comfortable. And the impact that had on our project was that more people were able to come and ask us questions, and we actually had more signups. That's a great way to reinforce that behavior and just give people positive feedback as well. And so this can be used as a model for both good or positive feedback as well as corrective feedback. I also want to call out here that this is a challenging skill to have or a challenging skill to practice, especially when the stakes are high or emotions are high or someone's feedback orientation, they have a lower score along those 4 elements that we talked about. And so a way to think about this maybe a way to diagnose it is just think about this. You have structural here. Maybe there's a structural issue with the feedback, meaning that there's something about the message that was the way that it was crafted that makes it difficult to understand or comprehend or to just process. Then there's internal. So this is stuff that's going on inside, more personal. Maybe you as a receiver might not be open to feedback at that moment in time. And then there might be interpersonal things going on, like it's difficult to hear or implement feedback because of the relationship between the giver and the receiver. As mentioned before, it does require a certain level of trust. And so if you're receiving feedback in the relationship, there's a dissonance between the way that they trust each other. That could also be a challenging situation. And so to further explain here, maybe structurally it's unclear what the person was trying to say. Or maybe you simply don't get feedback, even though you continue to ask. Or finally, you might be getting, if you ask and seek feedback, you might be getting conflicting messages depending on who is giving it to you. You might be getting some corrective feedback, and you might be getting some motivational feedback for the exact same thing. And so now that you know this, you can be more attuned in your feedback conversation. If you don't understand something, you can diagnose it now and saying, is this because I'm not really processing? It's unclear what they're trying to tell me. Or am I just receiving conflicting messages? I might need to clarify a little bit more. On the internal side or the personal side, maybe you're just not ready. It's not the right time. Maybe you have a lot of stuff going on. You might not be ready to receive feedback. And you should signal that as well. You can be gracious and say, hey, I really do want to receive your feedback. This week is really challenging for me. Or, hey, I'm going through some personal things that I'm not in the mind state to do that. That's completely fine. The second one is you might just focus on the negative and can't let it go. You ever receive a piece of feedback that just really stung and you just can't let it go and that really just destroys your whole day? That's what I'm talking about here is you might receive a piece of corrective feedback that you just internalize so much that it just ruins your whole day. And so that's something that might be going on about receiving that feedback message. And then the last bit is also along the similar lines. We might feel threatened by certain feedback. And that could lead to intense emotions like anger, guilt, shame, and frustration. And so, just something to be mindful of as to why feedback conversations can be so challenging is we need to lower the stakes a little bit and say, no, this is in service of our goal, or I'm telling you this because I really want this for you, or whatever the situation requires, and less about, again, a personal issue. And then interpersonally, once again, you might disagree with the feedback just straight up, and that's completely fine, right? Like, it's your interpretation of the situation, and it's somebody else's interpretation as well. The second one is that maybe there's a power imbalance. For those of you that work on teams, you might be receiving feedback from a higher level manager. And so it could be challenging to even speak up in that conversation and say something back. You might just need to stay quiet, right? And so that could limit our ability to receive feedback as well. If it's the power imbalance between giver and receiver, it's hard to have a productive conversation when those circumstances arise. And then, consider yourselves, at least I would hope that you took something away from this. Now you have a little bit, you have the SBI model. We talked about feedback a little bit and some mindsets. Not everyone knows this stuff, and not everyone is traditionally trained in feedback. It's not a college course that you can take. It's kind of more of information that we learn or an experience over the course of having professional experience and work time. And so, that also provides some challenges. Not everyone is trained in this. Some people are used to certain styles. And then, by the way, we throw in completely different cultural practices, and that could also influence a conversation, especially if you work on a global team, let's say. And so it's important to call these things out and be mindful and explicit about feedback norms on your team or between the relationships that you have with folks that you work with and or customers. And so to wrap up, remember, the big message here always is feedback should be in service of, right? It should never be to destroy, and it should never be, to achieve a personal objective in order to make the giver feel better. And so back to Mr. Ed Schein, one of my favorite things as he talks about is that help is defined by whether or not the receiver feels helped, not by whether the helper asserts themselves that they've provided the help, right? The helper is not the judge of whether they helped. It's the receiver's perception. And so in a similar fashion for feedback, it's the same way, right? Like the feedback receiver should feel that it was helpful and in service of achieving the desired outcome in order to course correct. A lot of time gets lost, and a lot of effort and a lot of trust if we continue to let people veer off course. At the same time, it's a responsibility that you have to go out and seek some of that feedback. How do you know that you're doing well on any given day, on any given week, on any given month, right? Much less any given year. And so figure out what cadence works for you. And so test certain things out. Hey, I would love to just take your 10 minutes here once every 2 weeks to figure out how I'm doing. Am I still on course? Is my product doing well? Are we on time? Whatever it is that you're working on, it's really helpful to have that and keep it top of mind. It'll save you so much more time in the future. Thank you all for listening. I think we're going to go to questions now. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Leo Marin. I work at Google. You can follow me or just be on the lookout for some of my posts on @TheTeamWeekly on Instagram or on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much. This was great. Like, I just learned a lot, by the way. And time for actually questions right now. So we can maybe have some questions coming from the attendees here. The first question I have, actually, maybe like the others can just even, type their questions meanwhile we are talking about this question. But first of all, let's start with Josiane. So she's asking, interruption is always a problem. How to interrupt someone without being rude? So this is a great question.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways, and yes, it depends, right? Like obviously, any answer here is going to be it depends. I would say it depends on the norms. If you have trust with that person already, you can start picking up on some of these social cues if it's the first time that you're doing it. Otherwise, just ask before the meeting or before whatever situation. Just ask them, hey, how do you feel about being interrupted? I oftentimes, whenever I do presentations live, I always signal to the group, hey, you know what? For this particular situation, please leave all questions until the end. I really just want to go. It really interrupts my flow of thinking if you ask me questions throughout. Other times, I structure my content with breaks so that people can jump in and interrupt me whenever. And I will signal that as the person that's presenting. And so if you're the interrupter, be mindful of the relationship that you might have with someone. And then I would also say, could it wait? Right? Really ask yourself, could this wait? Or is what I have to say so groundbreaking that I need to interrupt right now? Because what you might be doing is causing them to lose their train of thought and perhaps have the desired impact that they wanted in that interaction.
Got it. So being clear in the first place will help then, right? So we can just summarize. And then the other one, actually, this is related to that one. Sometimes interruptions can be caused by the emotions, right? Like you want to just explain yourself and then kind of just get in the way, but that might cause like a trouble, right? Leo, what do you think? Like maybe we can kind of calm down and then, like you said, pause a little bit before we just say something. Will that work?
Yeah, I think pausing, but two things come to mind. Number one is don't ever tell someone to calm down, especially when they don't appear to be calm. That's just not helpful, right? Like what are they going to likely do is not calm down and do the opposite. But the second thing here is don't call out the emotion yourself. Don't make that assumption because it may not be. The behavior and the energy that they're presenting might look like anger to you because you're perceiving it, but maybe to them it might be extreme excitement, right? Yeah. And so if a lot of emotions are coming up, you can just name the behaviors but not the emotion. So you might say, hey, I'm noticing that you're being very fidgety with your hands, your color is flushed, your voice is elevated in volume. Could you explain to me what's going on? Mm-hmm. Allow them the grace of saying, yes, it's because I'm angry, or it's because I'm nervous. That is a more productive way to respond to emotions as opposed to just saying, why are you so angry? Just think about it whenever it's happened to us.
Right? That's true. Yeah. All righty. So this was great. And then let's jump into the other question. So Francisco is asking, how would you ask for feedback if you are in an environment where giving and receiving feedback is not common? So this is about culture, I guess. What would you say, Leo?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I've been in cultures like that. And so in the absence of being just very explicit, Francisco, if you're having a hard time asking for feedback multiple times and not receiving it, find different proxies of getting it. And so maybe, I mean, I don't know your situation, but let's just assume that you're trying to get feedback from a specific person. Try to find a proxy and find someone that interacts with that person to maybe ask it for you or to run something by them. Let's say you're working on a project and they present it on your behalf. That's an informal, indirect way. It's not ideal, but it's a way for you to receive feedback if the environment is not conducive to it. One of the other things that this does take is personal courage. And so, not knowing your circumstances, just continue to ask. And try to get creative in the ways that you ask. It could be formally like this in a call if you're still virtual. It could be live. It could be if you're using Google products on a Google Doc in a comment, or it could be in an email. It all kind of depends, but try to get creative with the way that you're seeking it. You might just strike gold.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And actually there's a follow-up question, like how to create a feedback environment, like by him, the same person is asking. So I guess these are the common things that you actually explained a little bit, but maybe we can elaborate a little bit too.
Yeah. So this all goes back to feedback orientation. And if, let's just say, I'm going to assume that you're not the leader of the team or the group. If you're trying to create that environment, it starts with your own behaviors. And so, in both giving it, but also seeking it. The more that you seek it, the more you're signaling that it's okay to seek feedback. And so, like I said earlier, it's contagious. Over time, people will learn that it's safe to seek feedback and be alive after it, as opposed to feeling threatened sometimes. And so, I would say that take some of that responsibility and seek it, as well as ask others before you give it. You say, "Hey, are you okay if I give you a little bit of feedback? I've been observing these things over the last couple of, name the time or the day, and just test it out. If the person says no, no problem. If they say yes, and you survive that interaction, that helps to build trust. And over time, you start developing those links of trust with people on your team. But what I will say is that, yes, feedback does start with you as being personally responsible for getting it, so that you can signal to the group or the environment that it's okay to do it.
Okay, got it. I think being courageous and then kind of being vulnerable, like, are the things like will work in this case, right? Like, you need to kind of, yeah, take the responsibility actually of being vulnerable in the first place to set an example in the team, right?
You're right.
So,
And stick to it too. Like, don't, like, this goes back to authenticity. Like, don't go asking for feedback and then react, have a negative reaction for it.
yes, exactly. Yeah, like you need to be open to it, right? So, and then show it, right? Okay. Alrighty. So, another question. You mentioned actually, like in the presentation, you may say, okay, maybe you don't agree with the feedback. So, what happens when you don't agree with the feedback? So, Monique is asking that.
Yeah. That's a common scenario, Monique. What I would say here is ensure that you clarify, right? Because you also don't want to shut that person out. Maybe they're coming from a place where they want to help and want to support. And so if you straight up say, "Hey, I don't disagree with you," that could signal a negative interaction. And so find a more graceful way to do that. And one way to do that is by asking productive questions, like, ensure that you really understand their message and just clarify. Could you say more about this particular thing that you said? Like, find the thing about it that you don't disagree with. Ask them questions. Is it possible that we might have different opinions about this? That opens the gate for them to ask you, well, what do you mean? What's your opinion on it? And then you can have a more productive conversation, because sometimes with the disagreement, it might just be that even though there was one experience, there was two separate ways of experiencing that thing. And so ask clarifying questions. Allow yourself to be, I like what you said, Kubra, be a little bit vulnerable there. I wouldn't start off with saying, well, I completely disagree, because that's unproductive and it just shuts down the conversation. What you can say, it's continue to seek further understanding, and see where really the points of view are coming, and maybe they might change their opinions about the feedback, or you might change yours as well, without tarnishing the relationship.
I agree. And then here's like one thing that I was thinking while you're explaining. So, is it good to remember the goal of the feedback? Like, just to zoom out a little bit. Why are we talking about this one, right? So, we have a disagreement for sure. But what is like this feedback helping us to achieve, let's say, this thing? Maybe it will help us to align, the, let's say, like, this connection or like the disagreement over there, because once we, I think, agree on the goal, so that will help us to just maybe unpack the disagreement much more. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And that's one of the things that we talked about here, is the roles in the feedback process between the giver and receiver is you must agree. And so, Monique, if you don't agree on the goals or the standards, maybe check for that misalignment. Maybe they're giving you feedback on something that you didn't ask feedback for. So remember the tennis example I gave. If you're looking for feedback on your swing, but you're getting feedback on your footwork, that's just not helpful. And so it's great to check for misalignment on goals as well.
Perfect. Thank you. So other question is coming from our like kind of what is it? Oh my God, I forgot the word. So Sosi is attending all of our sessions, so I'm really happy to see his
That's great.
questions all the time. So I'm just going to call out that one. But any advice on how to tailor feedback for different personalities? Interesting. I love this question.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of this goes back. Remember that depending on how you're defining personality, I'm just going to use feedback orientation here. We all have, because of our personalities and different upbringings and relationships, social relationships, we might have different feedback orientations. And so we might not find it as useful. We may not be the most self-aware people. We may not know how to action on feedback. That's part of that self-efficacy. And so, yes, you can tailor your feedback advice and it helps to understand where that person might be coming from. And so I would say do your homework a little bit. Think through how your feedback, based on what you know about that person, how that might land.
Mm-hmm.
And remember also that, that 3-to-1 ratio, motivational versus constructive. Feedback doesn't always have to have this negative connotation. And
Yeah.
so 3 motivational to 1 corrective, it really helps uplift that person and make them feel supported and make them more receptive to what you have to say, if what you have to say is going to be constructive. And so think through before you present that feedback exactly what you're already, it seems like you're implying that there are multiple personalities on the teams that you work with or the people that you work with. And so if you were to objectively ask yourself, how might this person respond? What do I think their feedback orientation might be? Are they more receptive? That'll give you a sense of how you might tailor that message.
Alrighty. So that was a good one again.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
for
you, Sophie.
asking, Sosu. And then Sayali is asking, what kind of feedback is appropriate? So in person, text, slash mail, or over a call? Okay, format is important.
Yeah, and before there's no right answer here. Honestly, it might seem that the most obvious answer is in person or video call. What I would say is check with the person, because maybe they do prefer text or maybe they do prefer a phone call, and so just check. That's something you might ask. Hey, I have a piece of feedback for you. What would be the best way to give it to you? Hey, let's jump on a 10-minute call. Or they might say, maybe their feedback orientation is really high and they're like, hey, it'd be great if you could just send it over text and I'll read it on my way to whatever. And so I would check. I will say, however, that in-person and video allows you to see some of those social cues as to how the person might be responding, especially if it's a higher stakes feedback conversation. So for those circumstances, yes, I would recommend having more in-person or video conference or video call interactions, just for you to watch their facial cues, their gestures, right? Those are oftentimes the cues that we miss when we use some of those other mediums. And so that's definitely one thing, but it's always just good to check, right? Like, you never know. Somebody might just be really appreciative of, they might take more time to process. And so email might work for them because they can mull over that email, reflect on it, and give you a more thoughtful response.
Alrighty. We have more questions, I guess, here. Let's see, what do we have? So, do we not have any more questions? No? Okay. So maybe I can ask some questions. We still have time, if that's okay, Leo.
Sure. Yeah.
So one question that I had was like how to create a safe space in the first place, that receiving feedback and then kind of like giving feedback should be okay. Like, let's say this is like you said it right, trust should be the main goal of it, but what are the like simple steps to create that safe environment in the first place? Can we call out those like simple steps maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say depending on the circumstances. But I will say is, there's an element there of how you respond, right? So if you're on the receiving end of feedback, from someone that's genuinely trying to help and support you in service of a goal. And if you respond unproductively or negatively, that will definitely influence the next conversation that you have with them. And so what I'll say to create these types of environments is, number one, watch how you react, right? Like, take some of that responsibility, because you might be signaling that you don't want feedback ever. And that will more than likely cause that person to not give it to you the next time, or other teammates, right? Because people talk, so they'll say, hey, don't go to Leo because he's not very receptive to feedback. And then all of a sudden I'm operating in a blind spot. And so watch how you respond in this. And if you're on the giving side, ensure that you signal that. Say, hey, I'm coming to you because I really care about this work. I really care about this team. And actually mean it, right? You can't just say that stuff and your behavior show something else. And then be willing to risk vulnerability. Be willing to risk that you might be wrong in some of these interactions, and respond productively. You can definitely have emotions. We're emotional beings, but remember that sometimes on the other side of things, we could diminish someone else's vulnerability as well through our own behaviors.
Got it. A second question. So, for example, sometimes, like receiving feedback or seeking feedback may may make you look like you have insecurities, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you are doing like on a regular basis, it's just not good for your maybe like professional life that much, how to balance that one?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here, it seems like it's the same answer, but just check. Especially with, if it's one person that you're seeking feedback from, you should ask them, hey, what's an appropriate cadence that I can ask you for feedback from? Right? And they might tell you, maybe we should meet once a quarter or once a month, or they might tell you, come anytime. I have an open door policy.
Yeah.
You should check and test with people, as opposed to perhaps assuming that everyone is open to giving you feedback, because then, to your point, it might create that perception that you're an insecure person, right? When in fact, maybe you're just a very learning-oriented person and want to get better. And so what I would say there is, check with the people. Like, I do it with my own bosses, right? I ask them, hey, how often should we meet? How often should I give you feedback? And then I have different responses to different people. Some people are like, every week that we meet, and then other people are like, hey, let's do it maybe twice a quarter, so every 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah,
I agree. Perfect. So any other questions? I'm just looking at the chat, if we have any questions. Meanwhile, because people are kind of, thinking, okay, like, oh, this reminded me of something else, and then I can ask. That's why I'm just waiting. But meanwhile, like, maybe what are the, like, what if you say one single takeaway from this presentation and, like, about feedback, what would it be?
Yeah, I think for me, the big takeaway is that we need to be responsible for seeking it as well. My personal worry at all times is, and are the slides still up?
No,
they're not. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a piece there about blind spots. I'm consistently worried that I am operating in a blind spot where there is information that others are perceiving about me and my work, and I can't see it, and no one's going to tell me about it.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's just my personality, but I'm constantly on the lookout, and I have a higher orientation toward feedback because I want to improve and make sure that I'm showing up as a great team member. And so seeking feedback doesn't happen very often, especially the higher you go up in organizations. And receiving, we're constantly giving it, right? We always have opinions, but we don't really seek it as much as we should.
That's true. Yeah. For example, you need to look in the mirror, right, to see what you are having, let's say, on your face. And then maybe you have something while you were eating, like, and then no one tells you, and then you don't have a mirror at that time. Yeah. So it's kind of similar to that one, like, in my opinion. And then you go with that one, and then just realize, okay, this was whole, on my face.
Yeah, that's the ultimate test of either friendship or work colleagues, if they're willing to tell you that you have something on your teeth.
That's a good metaphor. All right. Okay. So I think maybe we can conclude our session.
Wonderful.
So since we don't have any other questions, but thank you so much, Leo. So this was amazing. I love the conversation. I love the presentation. And we will have this presentation actually on our YouTube channel. So for the attendees who are not able to, watch us, maybe they can watch it later. So once again, thank you. You made this one great. And then, yeah, hope to see you maybe next time, I will say. Okay, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. All right, so let's just invite our second guest speaker. So, who actually I worked with in the past with all the time. So, I'm really happy to host her today. Magda is joining us today for a little bit session and then to talk about mindfulness and then well being. So, welcome, Magda.
Hi, very happy to see you again. Indeed, happy to be here and talk about mindfulness and well-being.
Cool. So I will just leave the floor to you and then just be on the background. But yeah, take it over and then, we will have the questions afterwards. But yeah, you are on stage now.
Wonderful. Thank you and welcome everyone again. I know you have just completed the first session. So maybe let's just take a deep breath all together and just allow ourselves to maybe slightly change the context, arrive fully into the next topic, which is creating a sense of well-being with mindfulness tools. And as per introduction, my name is Magda Jary. I've been with Google for over 13 years as the head of certifications on the Google Cloud team currently. However, my passion and my additional responsibilities also include facilitating mindfulness courses for Googlers and externally. So very happy to be here today with you to discuss this content. And the premise of this presentation is really this saying. So as the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. So I really wanted to acknowledge your commitment to staying present and listening, learning hopefully new things about yourself through sessions like this, and really prioritizing your own well-being so that you can be of even better service to others as a leader and in all areas of your life. So really appreciate you here and prioritizing your own growth, your own well-being to be of better service to others. I will briefly introduce the agenda. So some of the topics we will review today together, and it will also be a relatively interactive workshop. So stay tuned. We'll have exercises throughout the session for some interaction together. So first, I would love to know, we'll talk about our intention, what brings you here. I will give you a little bit of context about my background. We'll then discuss topics around creating space for choice. So moving away from maybe reactivity in life into more of purposeful and then a life full of choice. Then I wanted to share some sneak peek of some of the positive psychology science around explanatory styles. I will introduce the topics of empathy and kindness, and then we'll have our final meditation together. So this is pretty much what's in scope for our session today. And I wanted to start with the first activity for today. So the question is to please, using the chat function, share one word. If you could share one word that really best describes your current state right now. How are you feeling? What is your state? Anything that really describes where you're at right now, emotionally or from the well-being standpoint. If you would like to share one word using the chat section, that would be wonderful. And this will also give me an opportunity to see who's here and to say hi. So please don't be shy. Just share one word. How are you feeling right now? So for example, for me, I would share Magda, and the way I'm feeling right now is open. So Welcome. The first chat responses, we have happy, great to hear. Any other one-word introductions? Relaxed, perfect, content. Thank you for sharing. And I think, this is also one of these activities where all responses are welcome, right? I'm seeing nostalgic from JC. Grateful. As a leader in your teams, in your communities, this is oftentimes a powerful kickoff exercise to really get everyone to understand that we bring all these various experiences, things in life happen, and to acknowledge that it's okay, right? That there are people in different states in this very moment. And I think it offers us an opportunity to connect better with people around us. So thank you for sharing, and thank you for your introductions. Happy, anxious, grateful. As I said, all states are welcome. It's part of life. And I think practicing this awareness that people around us, including ourselves, of course, will be coming from different experiences is really a powerful tool for connection and mindfulness, ultimately well-being as well. So thank you. This was our first activity, more to come. So a little bit of introduction. As I mentioned, it's been a while for me here at Google, very happy about my core career on the Google Cloud side. And at the same time, Google really helped me with finding a path towards becoming a mindfulness teacher. So we have a flagship program that's called Search Inside Yourself. And a few years back, I took this program, really had a very tremendous impact on myself. And then I became a facilitator of this program internally at Google. It's a mindfulness-based emotional intelligence and leadership training. We do have a program at Google that's called GPause. So adding a little G, you'll notice, is a part of our culture here at Google oftentimes, which means I do facilitate Google-wide meditation sessions weekly and so on. I'm also a certified yoga teacher, and I love offering workshops and talks on in the area of mindfulness, well-being, and so on. And I think some of the experiences I'm sharing here via photos is also how, over the years, I would really bring the mindfulness tools as leadership tools, as engagement tools. So definitely happy to share some of the example of this, where you can really bring your whole self to pretty much any area of your life. So our second activity, I would love to know and understand what brings you here. So what is the interest? Why are you here attending this particular session? What is the intention? What is the desire to learn? And I think pausing on the intention is also a very powerful activity to help us with being more present across various areas of life. So I will monitor the chat now for your responses. What brings you here to this session, and what is your intention? So just again, one word or one sentence. What brings you here? What is your intention? What is your interest in this topic, right? Just share it via the chat. Curious to know what's present for you here. Yeah, so some of you say that you want to learn more about self-care. I think the spirit of learning in general. I think learning is really one of these very powerful intentions in the day-to-day. So becoming the lifelong learner, always a beautiful intention to have. Learning about being less anxious. So definitely recognizing the state. Thank you very much for sharing. Improving my mental health, to learn to become more mindful and focused, to learn and explore, learn something new. Beautiful. I felt that I'm always busy and with no time. I hope this presentation can give some tips to how to slow down. Beautiful, very beautiful intentions. All of the shares, really thank you. And of course, some of you interested in mindfulness itself. So as I said, it's important to know pretty much in every area of your life, like, what is my intention? What drives me today? Like, how do I want to show up? What is my motivation behind engaging in a different activity? And I think it's, as you adopt this attitude in life, you'll notice how life brings you more satisfaction because you are much more purposeful. Like, oh, I'm really dedicating my time and energy into this activity, and I'm clear about my purpose and intention. Versus sometimes, running a little bit maybe on the autopilot and not even being clear, why am I actually doing this? Is it really serving me? What's the actual intention? So definitely very grateful that you are also pausing today to reflect on your own intention. So I've started sharing a little bit of my journey, my professional journey, the mindfulness facilitator journey. And to be honest, as I was engaging with various teams across Google, they would often come to me and ask, hey, Magda, can you come over and deliver a meditation session? And then I would typically pause and ask, okay, so what's going on? What is actually going on that you think your team needs a meditation session? And then as I was doing this discovery with the teams, the keywords that would come up would often be, well, we actually need more empathy or support or self-care. We want to be able to pause, to be present, to have more balance in life, to be able to connect with each other and maybe disconnect with the work load and well-being, compassion. So this is really what I then realized, that it's not just please come and offer a meditation or please talk about mindfulness. It's really, how do we achieve these things in our lives with our teams? And I think these themes, you may notice, very much align also with your personal intentions, like what brings you personally here and what it is that you'd like to learn about. So when I introduce mindfulness topics, I actually often refer to this picture I took a few years ago on a road trip. If anyone recognizes this place, feel free to share. I will share in a few minutes, but in the meantime, if you want to guess a little, I will offer you some time. So as I said, I use this picture from the road trip because this is a very, very deep lake. And on the surface of this lake, there's lots going on, like winds and little storms and lots of movement. And so that's the surface. But when you go deep, you notice like the stillness, the constant stillness that's always there. So I often refer as a mental image to this place for myself, because that's often how I see mindfulness. There are storms in our lives, many things going on, distractions, the activities I do automatically, just on autopilot, the stresses of everyday life and work. However, the place, the inner place within, that's calm, that's confident, that's content, is actually there. And then the question is how quickly I'm able to tap into this resource, reconnect, and use it to my advantage in the day-to-day life. So that's one analogy for me, the personal analogy I think about when I think about mindfulness and this inner resource. Sometimes you may actually think about the clouds in the sky, right? Like the sky is there and the clouds just pass by. We don't need to like chase them, and think maybe about clouds as your thoughts, right? I think for many of us, the thinking mind is really something to work on a little bit, just not to get us carried away in the worrying or planning or the anxious patterns. So sometimes using this analogy for our thoughts patterns may also be very helpful, right? Just little clouds on the sky passing by, and we can be in this position of a witness, just noticing the clouds passing by. We don't need to like ride the cloud and chase them. I'll check the chat if anyone has been guessing what this place is. I don't see any guesses, but I will let you know this is a crater lake here in the US in Oregon. So with that, I wanted to offer a definition of mindfulness, just to be on the same page. Multiple definitions. I'm using a very simple one. It's a non-judgmental, caring attention here and now. So when we try to practice mindfulness, this quality of non-judgment, really important, right? It's not about, oh, I got distracted again, I'm not a good mindfulness person, right? That's judgment, right? So that's not it. It's also caring. It's being self-compassionate. It's being understanding towards ourselves and then ultimately towards others. And it's also grounded in the here and now. It's really being aware of the present moment, the present reality in my mind and body and the emotional state. So that's really mindfulness. And you'll notice the word attention is also being used in the definition, because that's ultimately what it is. The attention, certain quality of attention, the non-judgmental, caring attention that's grounded in the here and now. As opposed to, again, the mind on the autopilot, the distracted mind. So the mindfulness definitely helps us, me, be more enjoying the present moment much more. And I think the interest in mindfulness for me personally really comes from this realization some time ago, where I noticed how much time I spend just worrying about the future or regretting or replaying the past, right? And then I got a bit of like a sense of sadness about it, like, wow, the life is happening right now and I'm not here because I'm in the past or in the future. So for me, I think it was a very important personal reflection, because it really helped me be much more committed to then practicing mindfulness and being present, because again, I discovered this need in my life for more of this quality. So another concept I wanted to introduce, other than mindfulness and the quality of attention, presence, is really the opportunity that mindfulness brings with creating space for choice. And oftentimes in mindfulness courses, materials, some of you might have already heard this quote as well in different contexts. This is a very powerful quote that's oftentimes referred to. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So let me unpack it just a little bit here. The way I really resonate with this quote is really how difficult it is to get out of the reactive mind. Like somebody cuts you off in a traffic, right? Like, and you immediately, maybe you notice anger is there and you want to just yell back at them or what have you, right? So there's this reactive automatic response, and oftentimes we don't even realize that there is a moment we can create this space in which we can actually choose, right? So maybe if we practice mindfulness or have this natural capacity of creating this space, then this trigger happens, somebody is not being polite or whatever the situation might be, but you still create space and then choose to respond. And maybe the response will not be yelling back. Maybe the response will be more in line with how you want to show up in the world. us. So that's really, I think, what is meant by, in that space, is our power to choose our response, right? So we are responding versus reacting to a situation. And in many cases, we don't have full control over life and life circumstances. But what this quote empowers us to do is that what we do control is our response. How are we going to attempt and respond to a given situation? Are we going to just be like hopeless, or are we going to take it as an opportunity to learn? Again, like this is really what this quote is about, that we actually do have the power to choose the response. However, it starts with the space. And in our busy lives, oftentimes that's the piece that's missing, right? Because we are so in our own world and not really used to slowing down, pausing, and creating this new relationship. So the question I have for you right now, we talked about mindfulness, we talked about this reactivity and the importance of creating space in order to respond. What situations or areas of your life you might want to bring more mindfulness to? So just think, where in your life this could be helpful, this ability to create space, this ability to respond, the ability to be more present. What situations, where in your life you would like to bring more mindfulness to? So please share via chat. Where in your life this might be helpful? Because the more you immediately apply these new insights into your life, the better the chance you may notice opportunities for change. And it's also important to share your thoughts with others for accountability, for some inspiration, and also, mutual motivation. So I notice Francisco shares self-talk is one of these areas. Very, very powerful, right? Like noticing the quality of our own self-talk. Are we being on our own side? Or is the self-talk always, diminishing or very critical? Such an important area, foundational area, really, to start noticing, how am I actually talking to myself? What is the quality of my self-talk? So thank you so much for bringing this up. Yeah, so says, in my professional and personal life, absolutely, right? It's very applicable. Work and family, while networking, absolutely, right? So just reflect, personal life. Yeah. And I think the good news is that whichever area of life you start, the application of mindfulness and creating space and moving to the place of responding, wherever you start, it's, again, just a starting point. And then sooner or later, it will really positively affect other areas of your life as well. So thank you very much for participating in the third activity. Right now, I wanted to bring another perspective. So we talked about mindfulness, the importance of space and choice. Here is another piece, and I'll ground it a little bit in the neuroscience. Whatever we practice gets stronger. So if we practice kindness every day, at the end of the day, you reflect on things, if you practice gratefulness, gratitude, every day you reflect on things you are grateful for, or if you practice kindness, you respond to people with kindness and treat them as human beings with all emotions and all of the things. Whatever you practice really gets stronger. Similar, the note about the self-talk. If we keep practicing the diminishing self-talk, it will only get stronger, right? So I think this is an important reflection as well, to be with mindfulness, understanding what do I really practice, right? And do I want this thing to get stronger? And here is the neuroscience behind it. So with the neuroplasticity, which means that the neurons that wire together, fire together, meaning whichever neural pathways we keep using, they really get stronger, versus the pathways that we stop using over time also get weaker and not used. So that's definitely, the basic neuroscience behind any theory of forming a habit, but also something that we can very much use to our advantage, that if we want to prompt our brains for kindness, that's what we need to practice. If we want to prompt our brains for like a new ways of thinking, relating to the world, it takes practice. But it's with the background in neuroscience, we know that it is possible to rewire. And to this extent, I did want to bring up, for me, like still fascinating piece of positive psychology research, and it is about the explanatory styles. So the two key styles are the pessimistic and the optimistic style. And going back to being careful what we practice, because what we practice gets stronger, this is really an important distinction as well. So noticing, am I pessimistic about a given situation? Pessimistic style is characterized by, oh, this is just always going to be like this. So difficult situations are permanent. They are very personal. I'm the only one suffering from this thing in the whole world, right? Optimistic style is characterized by seeing things, I think, pretty much in a broader perspective. Like, well, yeah, maybe something happened, but it's life. It doesn't mean it will happen again. I have this personal power to work towards improving a situation. So I think if you're interested in these topics, I think reading more about the explanatory styles in the context of positive psychology, really important. And I think what stands out for me is probably this notion of the personal power. Like, I'm helpless, there's nothing I can do about the situation, versus I'm in control. Again, I can always choose my response to a given situation. It's not always super personal. There are multiple factors at play. So sometimes almost when I read these descriptions, I think about the optimistic style more as a realistic style. It just takes multiple factors into account versus just playing the narrative of the pessimistic scenario. So another conclusion I wanted to offer is how attention regulates emotion, and the importance of paying attention to positive things. So again, if we now have an exercise together of thinking about your recent misfortunes, probably if we now spend time thinking about it and your attention goes into sad places, very likely your emotional state will very quickly become lower, sad, and so on. However, if we have an exercise, let's pay attention to things in life you are grateful for. So just for a moment, let's pause. And if you want to, just for a few moments, think about just a few things that happened recently you are grateful for. And as you think about these things you're grateful for, notice your emotional state. So quite likely you might feel some warmth in the heart area, some gratefulness, some emotion of feeling supported or happiness, contentment, right? So I think paying attention to positive things deliberately as a tool of coping, as a tool of well-being, is really something to be aware of and to use to your advantage. Because oftentimes when we think about well-being, what we actually mean is also just experiencing more joy in life. So with that, I have a question for you. What brings you joy? What are some of the activities, things in life that for you personally that bring you joy? So again, using the chat function, just share what brings you joy. I hope it's a fun one to reflect on. What are the activities in your life that bring you joy? And please share via chat. Yeah, so I see Sosu says spending time with a loved one, seeing that my family is happy. Beautiful. So thank you for sharing and again, reflecting on it. I think it's important to realize spending time in nature, absolutely, right? All these things bringing you joy. Dance, laughter, perfect. So I wanted to bring another piece of research here that I also find very interesting. This is by Dr. Sonia Lubomirsky, who wrote a book, The How of Happiness. And in her book, she shares 12 strategies to happiness. And what I like about this book is it doesn't say you need to follow all the 12 steps to be happy. Not at all. This is the research, also based on positive psychology. The strategies that are scientifically proven to be helpful for various audiences, various populations, and you don't need to do all of them. You just need to choose the ones that work best for you in your life. So maybe starting with 1 or 2, maybe over time getting to 3, but it doesn't mean that in order to be happy, every single strategy needs to happen. So if we review some of these steps and these strategies for happiness together, you'll notice how expressing gratitude, cultivating optimism, avoiding overthinking, practice acts of kindness, nurture social relationships, develop strategies for coping, learn to forgive, increase flow activities, so the ones we are really engaged in, fully in the zone, save your life's joys, commit to your goals, practice religion and spirituality, meditate, engage in physical activity, and act like a happy person, right? So I think quite a few of the things we've discussed earlier today, we've touched on. So if you are really interested in exploring these kinds of topics, I definitely recommend this book, the studies here. And again, just reflecting on what are some of these steps that you may want to apply today in your own life. So we are now moving towards the final section of the presentation before we go to the Q&A as well. And it's about empathy and connection, because I think, this is the next step. Once we are content, happy, grounded in the sense of well-being, very naturally, as human beings, we want to connect. We want to be in relationship with others. And we have this natural ability to empathize with others. And we also know that there are various ways to develop empathy. And specifically, the empathy is developed by seeing similarities. So really acknowledging, appreciating, we are all human beings. Everyone in life wants to be happy. We are all exposed to suffering and worrying, but this makes us all similar in this case. And then The second practice of developing empathy is by offering kindness. So literally just wishing everyone to be well, just wishing everyone to be happy. So we can practice this with mindfulness, and there is a dedicated meditation practice that also helps to develop this as a mental habit. So as a final exercise right now, I would like to offer a very brief meditation. So I hope you are up for it, just a few minutes, and I will offer a slightly modified version of a Just Like Me, a kindness meditation. So whether you've meditated before or not, really doesn't matter. Just if you want to follow my instruction, all shall be well. So in order to start, just notice your current surroundings, notice the space around you, and also notice your posture. And if you are sitting, try to sit in a way that's both relaxed yet alert, tall spine, open chest. If you're standing, just being grounded, feet planted in the ground, also tall spine. And feel free to close your eyes or lower your gaze. And we'll start with a breathe 3 mindful breaths practice. So with the first breath, take a deep breath and just notice the full cycle of the breath. The inhale, the exhale. And then with the second breath, notice your body right now. How is the body? And with the third breath, ask yourself, what is important right now in this moment? And now direct your attention to somebody in your life who's very easy to love, like your loved one, a very lovable being. And just picture this being smiling at you, being around you. And let us have some wishes of kindness and well-being to arise for this person, for this being. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from pain and suffering. May you live with ease. And just notice the feeling of sending kindness to your loved one. Now bring to mind somebody you don't even know well, a stranger, maybe just a person you see every now and then passing by or on a video call. You don't even know much about this person. So just bring to mind this person you don't even know much about. And start with recognizing that this person, just like you, is a fellow human being. And they also just want to be happy and healthy and have fulfilling relationships in life. And notice, how does it make you feel to think about this neutral person in this way, from this perspective of a fellow human being? And let's have some wishes for well-being to arise for this person. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from pain and suffering. May you live with ease. And finally, think about yourself right now. And let's offer some wishes of well-being and kindness to ourselves. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from pain and suffering. May I live with ease. For the final few moments, just sit with whatever is present for you right now, noticing the breath, maybe any emotion arising, the energy in the body. Just sit in silence, just being present to anything that's arising for you. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. Maybe offer yourself a nice stretch. And that was our brief sample of a kindness meditation. Hope you've enjoyed it. So now, to sum up, some of the key themes I wanted to recap on, some of the topics we've discussed today. We started with the definition of mindfulness and really this notion of being able to create space. And the space is important so that we can respond rather than react. And this really helps us with creating choice in our life. We talked briefly about the explanatory styles, about the pessimistic, optimistic, and again, the importance of being really aware of the style that is our default and whether this really serves us, because what we practice gets stronger. So it's important to be aware of some of the habits of mind we are reinforcing. And we talked about how attention regulates emotion. So paying attention to positive things in life, the things that bring us joy, can oftentimes be a very helpful way of bringing joy and well-being into life. We reviewed the strategies for happiness and talked about empathy and practiced the version of the Just Like Me meditation. And then again, it's all about being kind towards ourselves, towards others. So with that, I do have our final activity, which is, again, the one word. Right now, what is the one word you would share that describes your state, how are you feeling? Because the way you felt half an hour, 40 minutes ago, that's past. It's important to keep checking in on your state right now. So what is the one word that describes your feelings, your state right now? So if you could share, via chat, that would be wonderful. The one word. And other than that, we'll be slowly moving to the Q&A section as well. But just reflect for a moment. What is the one word that describes your state right now? I see relaxed and balanced, motivated. Wonderful. So peaceful. Yes, thank you for sharing and reflecting. Tired, absolutely. Some of you might be hungry, whichever the state is, just acknowledging, and starts with really building the self-awareness of your own state. So thank you for sharing. And with that, I'm happy to take some questions now. So feel free to ask any questions you might have.
Alrighty. This was a relaxed session, Magda. So I love this. I like as a regular meditator. So I really enjoy like doing these type of things, just deep dive into like mindfulness and things like that in my my personal life. So while I'm waiting for actually questions from the crowd, so I would like to ask you, what do you think of the effects of these efforts like to your professional life? Let's say like since this elevate is all for applied skills like learnings for their own career, so how do you see the connection between these like mindfulness sessions with meditations and things like that, like affecting your professional career?
I think really critical, and so many areas I could start with. Like we can let's take an example of being on a global team, right? So for many years, that's the team I'm on. I have team members, colleagues all over the world. Very often we interact via email or just via the video call. And just imagine in your own experience how easy sometimes it may be to almost forget there is a person on the other side of that email, right? Like, I think there's this notion of an angry email and like, oh, how could this person write this or that? And it's dangerously easy to like lose sight that this is a human being. This is my colleague. This is a person who just like me wants to do a good job. And so I think definitely gives me so much more compassion and space and even understanding like, oh, it's me and my trigger. I shouldn't like project. So just, I think helps me being much more present to what's actually going on. Hey, Magda, it's just an email. You need to clarify this or that. Don't project, a story onto the situation. So I think in the long term, I hope I'm being seen as a compassionate leader, as a person who engages with others, treats them with respect. And when you like working with your teammates, the results of the work are oftentimes also even stronger, right? Because whenever you just feel safe and connected to a given team, you are even more productive. So I think, again, on so many levels, this applies to the professional life, the day-to-day, the meetings, the respect, but also leadership, right? As a manager, as a leader on the team, it's so helpful, right? Like listening to others, right? That's also a huge space. So I could talk about this for a while for sure. So whatever is of interest, just let me know.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I like sometimes we underestimate the importance of this like effort. And then we say, okay, like this is like a kind of lifestyle effort, but it's not, like, in my opinion. It's just affecting all of our your personal aspects of your life, like not only just like your personal life, but just professional life as well. So it's good to call out here. So this is still related to your leadership skills, like still like self-reflecting on yourself, what triggers you, like you said, on the emotional side, so you can just be a better leader, or like like kind of be a better teammate. So yeah, that's totally important. So my other question is, okay, actually one question we have, maybe we can ask that one before my question. Josiane is asking, do you think yoga can help to reduce stress? Is it better when compared to meditation? What's your personal option on that?
So I think I would maybe even up-level this question. It's really about being intentional about the activity you are engaging with. If you want to use yoga, wonderful tools of yoga, in order to help you cope with stress, I'm sure it will have great benefits. If you do yoga mindlessly, just another thing I need to do, fit into my schedule quickly, my mind is somewhere else, right? I don't know, maybe this is actually not helping with stress as well. So that's why whatever you do it with intention, purpose, and the purpose of stress reduction is very powerful. So whether you use yoga, engage in yoga for this, or meditation, both can definitely help you with achieving your overall intention, overall goal. So I would definitely not go into a territory of comparison of yoga versus meditation. It's absolutely personal. Oftentimes, yoga helps us warm up the body or release the stress in the body so that the mind can also relax and be a little bit more present. So there's a lot of connection between, yoga and meditation. So ideally, my recommendation, after your yoga practice, you sit quietly for a few minutes and meditate, right? That would be the ideal scenario if you want to do both. And there's no need to compare. It's really personal. Give it a try. Give it your intention, and I'm sure all will be well.
Yeah. So it depends on what you like, and then trying and seeing, right? So like that's what I do all the time too. Sometimes, like meditation works, sometimes doesn't, like even, within itself. So sometimes you don't feel like you want to do it. So that's okay too, like some days, right? But yeah, I was going to ask you about that one. What do you think of the like consistency on doing these, like efforts, like just I shouldn't call them efforts because it doesn't make sense, because like it's a, how can I say, like an ongoing process that you just keep doing. So the consistency, can we maybe like talk about that one, Magda, a little bit?
Yeah, I think consistency definitely works very well in the territory of building a habit. Right? It's the more something becomes a habit for you and is a natural thing, it's just easier and it just becomes a part of you. So I would recommend consistency and building a habit out of meditating daily or committing to a yoga, or depending also what your practice is. For many people, maybe running or walking is your practice. And at the same time, having realistic goals, right? Just don't maybe, I want to, don't necessarily go in a territory of I need to meditate for half an hour or an hour every day, otherwise it doesn't count. Please, don't go there. It's okay if, life happens and on a given day you will just pause for a moment, take a few deep breaths, and then next day you go back to maybe a slightly longer dedicated practice. So I think it is consistency, but it doesn't need to be strict, right? Just offer accommodations to yourself so that it's just part of your life.
That's totally fine. Yeah. So like picking up from where you left off is really, really important. Even if you skip a day, that's fine too. But like 10 days at 10 minutes a day like would be enough. For example, 5 minutes, even like some breathing exercises during the day, or like even when you just join a meeting, like before the meeting, you can just do the breathing exercise to just calm down and things like that. So yeah, will help, I guess. Any other questions? I'm looking at the audience, like on the comment section. Please put your questions, like if it's related to like mindfulness, or if it's related to the combination of like these skills, like building up to your professional life. So we can just ask Magda here. So maybe I can come up with other questions that I have. So how, like for stress, like the body reacts to stress all the time. So do you think, like from health wise, so these are like, of course, how can I say, again, I'm repeating myself, but these are underestimated, like practices that we see all the time. But for a quick, relief, or let's say some people may be confused, okay, this is like something that I, how can I say, will do and then I will see the result right away, or like is it like a just a long-term practice that we are building and then just make like this is as a habit. So should we maybe like a little bit talk about that part, because people may be confused. Okay, I will do this for a month and then I will see the results. Like, what is the best, like, term we should say? Okay, in a year, in 5 years, like, what are the those results? Because I got this question before, so I'm just curious.
I think it will also, again, depend on the layers. I think you will notice different layers of the benefits of your practice. Maybe one day you'll notice like, oh, wow, I didn't react the way I used to this person who annoyed me. Or like I offered to myself a much more compassionate voice. Or I wasn't stressed out that I don't know, missed missed the bus. I was okay with the opportunity to walk, right? Like, so just little things, because I think the key important thing as well is the core of this is not really to meditate in order to become a better meditator, or you want to like sit still for an hour and this is it. No, it's really, this is a practice that supports your fitness in life. And a similar case is when you think about practicing your physical routine at a gym, right? Like daily repetitions just over time help you build the muscle. So a similar comparison goes in the mindfulness space. The more you realize your mental processes, your reactivity, and the more you learn to create the space in this controlled environment of a practice, think about, again, a gym, then when you apply it in life, you are much better equipped, right? Similarly, again, practicing at a gym helps you build strength over time. So it's a similar analogy. Over time, in this case, you build a better resilience, self-awareness, self-management. And just one thing to our previous comment when we said, this is an underestimated area, and how does it really apply to your professional life? Studies from the Stanford School indicate when people were surveyed about the best leaders they interacted with, there were 8 qualities listed for these best leaders. And maybe also in your life, when you think about what is the quality of the best leader I've ever worked with, super likely, and the studies came to the same conclusion, that 6 out of 8 of the qualities were purely emotional intelligence related. Not IQ, but EQ.
Yeah.
Right? These were leaders who were great listeners, who were great communicators, who were empathetic, right? So again, of course, your ability to do the work and have the domain expertise, super important, right? All these IQ related things, being smart. At the same time, in your overall leadership journey, you'll notice for yourself, for people around you, that these emotional intelligence qualities are really super, super critical. So I, again, really appreciate you spending time as well learning about these things, because the sooner you realize that and practice this, the more you'll benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So we don't have any other questions in the comment section. Hopefully everyone, like had their own answers with the session. So maybe that's the, like sign of this session was really, really successful. So thank you so much, Magda, once again, for this great session, and then hoping to host you maybe one more time, like in the future, or maybe work together. I'm sure we will work together. But really, really, I genuinely thank you for, presenting us today. And then, I think, maybe have a great rest of your day, and also have a great weekend. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, as well. Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, bye-bye. All right. So let's just say a few words on the closing part. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. and hope you all enjoyed the sessions. I would like to actually kindly request from you to fill out the favorite feedback surveys in the follow-up emails or the links that we are sharing on the screen, and then across all of the website and things like that, so we can improve the program still. And you are going to obtain a certificate of participation if you fill out the feedback surveys after the sessions. So this is our last theme that we are going through. So with December, we are going to conclude all of the sessions for this year. So if you attend December episode and then fill out the feedback surveys, so you will get a certificate of participation out of the Elevate program. So feel free to use the hashtag Elevate Training on social media to share your experience with Elevate. And I'm looking forward to actually seeing your stories out of this program. If you, for example, applied these learnings to your professional life and then you got like a raise, you switched to another job, like you got another role at another company, or like you got a like promotion and things like that, let us know. Just share with us so we can just highlight, like promote you on our Google channels. So I'm looking forward to hearing those stories. And lastly, if you have any questions, please email us at elevate-team@google.com. And also, before I just say a few words to just say goodbye, I want to actually invite you to our biggest event in this year. So DevFest North America is going to be happening next week, and we will have thousands of developers joining us for inspirational keynotes, technical content, and giveaways, swags, and networking sessions. So please just come and join us. You can RSVP on the link that you are seeing on the screen right now. And I'm actually really excited about this one. So hope to see you over there. And with that said, I will just, say goodbye to all of you. Please stay safe and then take care till we see you again. Thank you, everyone.